my name is Iris. Last month, I went on a Caribbean cruise with my girlfriends, a group birthday celebration we'd been planning for years. We all turned 65 this year, and decided to mark the milestone together in style. The trip was everything I needed and more: warm breezes, bright blue water, endless laughter, and not a single alarm clock. We sipped fruity drinks with little umbrellas, danced under string lights, and told stories late into the night like we were in our 20s again. I had such a good time, but I couldn't stop thinking about my grandson, Ethan. Every time I passed a gift shop, I found something that made me think of him. By the end of the trip, I had filled half my suitcase with presents for just that little boy. But nothing could have prepared me for what I came home to. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far this little story can travel. Let's make this space feel a little more connected, no matter how many miles are between us. I pulled up slowly in the driveway. The sky was tinted with the soft light of the start of sunset, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked until I saw the lawn. At first, I didn't process it. I blinked, thinking maybe I was at the wrong house. But then I saw it, my blue overnight bag, the one I always used for weekend getaways, sitting neatly on top of a plastic storage bin like a label on a shipment. Around it, boxes were stacked haphazardly, taped but slightly crushed, as if someone had rushed through the motions without caring what was inside. My photo albums were packed away carelessly, some upside down, half open with photos spilling out: Chris's birthday parties, our wedding day, that last camping trip he and Frank took together. They looked like afterthoughts, like memories someone had tried to shove aside in a hurry. The yard looked like a construction site. Dirt piles where my dahlias once grew. The rose garden was gone, entirely dug up, sectioned off with neon tape. A few paving stones had been pulled up and rearranged in a loose circle, ringed with bricks. At first I couldn't tell what it was, but then I realized, someone was trying to build a fire pit. In my garden. And then I saw it. The trellis. It was lying in a splintered heap near the edge of the lawn, broken down into pieces like scrap lumber. Firewood, I thought. They'd turned it into firewood. That wasn't just any trellis. My father built it the spring I married Frank. Chris had crawled beneath as a child, picking petals off the climbing roses. Frank's father had supplied the wood, cedar from the trees on the family farm. It was the kind of thing that should have been preserved, or at the very least, taken down with care. Not shattered. Not tossed aside like kindling. I got out of the car with my knees trembling, clinging to the door frame so I would not fall. The air smelled of roses and betrayal. There was a note taped to the top box. Just a piece of scratched paper with the curled edges waving gently in the breeze. I am sorry, Mom. Ashley's parents are going to move in here. We no longer have space for you. I hope you understand. No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Neat, slanted to the right. Chris always bragged about how beautiful his cursive was. I used to help him with his school essays, correcting the grammar while he ate pretzels next to me. I picked up a framed photo, our family Christmas of 1995, and pressed it against my chest as I walked to the front door and tried my keys. The first one slid in but didn't turn. Neither did the second. I paused, tried again. Nothing. A cold, creeping tightness curled in my chest. Why were the locks changed? My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Chris had called a locksmith and forgot to tell me. Maybe Ashley misinterpreted something. Maybe, I knocked softly at first. Still clinging to the hope that this was a misunderstanding, that this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, I already knew. But no one came to the door. So I knocked again, harder. My hand trembled with each blow. The door opened just a crack. Ashley's face appeared behind the chain, like I might try to force my way in. She wore that familiar expression, arrogance. Oh. You came back, she said lightly. Hoped you would have gotten the message. Chris stood a few steps behind her, arms crossed, eyes glued to the floor like a child caught sneaking a cookie. I didn't look at her. I looked at him. What is this? I asked, my voice catching as I held up the note. Ashley sneered. Can't you read, old woman? She unlatched the chain and stepped forward, just enough to assert herself. We just need more space. My parents are old too, you know. It's only fair. I turned back to Chris. Still, he wouldn't meet my eyes. You've had the house long enough, Mom, Ashley added, sharper this time. It's ours now. This house is ours. Chris finally looked up, just for a second. This is for the best, he murmured. I could see the hallway behind her, but it wasn't mine anymore. The family photos were gone, replaced with glossy canvas prints of babies dressed as fruit, pears, pumpkins, strawberries. The worn rug I'd always meant to replace had been tossed for a sleek runner in muted gray. The lemon polish I used religiously was gone too, replaced by the strong scent of potpourri and incense, heavy and strange. And then the door began to close, no hug. No apology. Just the soft, final click of the lock, like they were shutting out a stranger. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the door, waiting for something, an explanation, a call of my name, even just a second thought. But nothing came. I don't know what made me reach for my phone. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I took pictures, not for evidence, not for legal reasons. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I just needed to prove to myself that it was real. That I hadn't imagined the note. The new locks. The coldness. Maybe, deep down, I thought if I documented it, I wouldn't forget how this moment felt. How easily love can vanish. Then, like I was moving through a fog, I began to load everything into my car. Not even thinking about where I was going. I drove aimlessly for a while, the streets blurring past, until I spotted a small park. One I used to take Chris to when he was little. Without really deciding to, I pulled over and parked. I found a bench near the pond and sat down, quietly settling around me like an old memory. The note was back in my hand. I smoothed it over my lap, rereading the same phrase until the words lost their meaning. We no longer have space for you. Not even I'm sorry. No, let us talk. Just space or the lack of it. A little boy ran by with a kite, laughing. His mother followed him, smiling, not noticing that they had just crossed the path of someone who was once like her. Before, I was the one who had a laughing child and a bag full of snacks and bandages. The memories came suddenly, rushing in without warning. Chris laughing as a child in the bathtub, tiny fingers gripping mine the first day of preschool. Frank waving from the driveway as he and Chris left for their last fishing trip. Ethan asleep on the couch with peanut butter smeared on his cheeks. They weren't in order or complete, but they came all the same, each one landing with a weight I hadn't expected. I had given so much. Quietly, steadily, without keeping score. And now, sitting on that park bench, the pain was still there, but something else had started to settle beside it. It wasn't anger, not yet, but it was heavier than sorrow. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into the pocket of my coat, like a receipt for something I never should have bought. A breeze from the river brushed my cheek, cold as a hand. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the path ahead looked different, not new, just clearer. I started to wander the walking path, not really knowing where I was going, just needing to move. The gravel crunched softly under my shoes as I drifted beneath the trees. The bench appeared just when the weight in my chest began to feel heavier than my steps, tired not from the walk, but from the heartbreak. It sat on a small rise overlooking the playground where Chris used to run in circles, chasing leaves and laughter. I made my way to it and sat down slowly, letting the ache settle beside me like an old companion. The view was peaceful, but I didn't take it in. I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or calm down. My breathing came in uneven waves, like my body couldn't decide which way to go. I sat on the bench looking down at the park, the empty swing swaying gently in the breeze, the faint sound of a dog barking somewhere in the distance. My hands were folded in my lap but my mind drifted. That's when it started, the slow, uncoiling of memory. Ashley had been sowing seeds for years. Not outright insults, no, it was quieter than that. Small comments disguised as jokes. When we finally make this house ours, I'm going to tear down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Something more open, don't you think? I remember laughing then, brushing it off like dust. But there were more. Remarks about how the garden was too much for someone my age. How nice it would be to have her parents nearby. One big happy family, she'd said more than once, with that same sugary smile. I chalked it up to nerves, to her need for control, to her simply trying. I told myself she was adjusting. I wanted to believe that. But sitting there, watching the sunlight stretch across the playground, it all shifted. Those comments weren't random. They formed a pattern, like a picture drawn in invisible ink, now exposed in the quiet. And then, from that place of stillness, another memory surfaced, sharper, heavier than the rest. It was Chris, 5 months ago, sitting at the kitchen table. It's just for tax purposes, Mom, he said, sliding a set of title transfer documents toward me. It'll protect the house if something ever happens. I remember hesitating, the pen hovering in my hand. Something about it didn't feel right. But he smiled, gentle and familiar, and I wanted to believe him. We filled out the forms together. I kept my copy tucked away in the safe with the deed to the house. But I never filed them. He never mentioned them again till, a few days before I left for the cruise. The same one I came home early from to find my things outside. He asked me if it had all gone through. I told him it had. Yes, don't worry. But it hadn't. The house was still mine. And the papers he gave me, the ones I never submitted, were still somewhere in the back of a closet he didn't even know existed. And with that memory, I reached into my coat pocket and took out my keys. The studio key was still on my keychain, wedged between the mailbox key and the little flashlight that hadn't worked in years. Its silver finish was worn to a dull gray, the edges smoothed by time. It belonged to a small studio on Elm Street, above an old bookstore and a flower shop that always smelled like damp eucalyptus. Back when Frank and I were first dating and I was working part-time at the Community Art Center, I rented the studio. It was small but it was cheap. It was never meant to be permanent. Then, a few years later, the building went up for sale. I had inherited some money, and it seemed like a smart investment. I kept the apartment for myself, a quiet place for crafts, reading, and the kind of stillness that didn't exist at home. I never told Chris about the studio, not to keep it a secret, just because it never seemed important. I bought the building before he was even born. It was mine, in every sense of the word. And suddenly, standing there with that little key in my hand, I realized, I still had somewhere to go. As I drove there, I tried to keep my mind blank, too many memories, too much pain. And then, suddenly, it was right there. I parked. The street was silent, the windows dark. I went up slowly, my suitcase thumping behind me on each step. I'd bring the rest up in the morning. The studio door jammed a little, but the key turned without a problem. The smell hit me first, dust and old paper, mixed with the dry trace of the sachets I had tucked into drawers years ago, and the faint scent of paint. The space always felt smaller than I remembered, just a small place, a combined kitchen and living room, one tiny bedroom, and a narrow bathroom tucked in the back. But it was clean, intact, and mine. I set down the suitcase and walked to the window. The alley below was quiet, lit by a few flickering lampposts like distant, fading thoughts. I placed my palm against the cold glass and stood there, letting the silence fold around me. Then I opened the closet, lowered the safe, and took out the documents Chris once helped me fill out. I stared at them, and the tears came. How did I wind up like this? What happened to the young man who used to call me from his dorm room just to talk? I set the papers aside on the small table, laid them down carefully, and crawled into the narrow bed. That night I cried myself to sleep. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called Trent O'Neill. He had been our family lawyer for years. "This is Iris," I said. There was a pause, then a low, familiar laugh. "Iris Valdez. It's been too long." He agreed to meet with me that afternoon at his office on Willow Lane. It's in a modest brick building, with ivy climbing the walls. Inside, it smells of leather and old paper. The space is warm and comfortable, with bookshelves lined with worn legal volumes and newer titles, a pair of leather chairs across from his desk, and sunlight filtering through linen curtains. I arrived with a file with every legal document I could find. Trent greeted me with a warm nod, motioned for me to sit, and adjusted his glasses. He spread the papers across his desk, brows furrowing as he read. He didn't rush. I didn't interrupt. He only made the occasional soft sound of recognition. I told him everything, how I came home from the cruise, what I found on the porch. I showed him the note, the pictures I had taken of my possessions. I told him Ashley's words. He listened. He didn't flinch. After several minutes, he tapped one of the pages. "You never finalized it," he said quietly. "This transfer was never registered. It's incomplete. You're still the legal owner, Iris. They can't sell it, and they definitely can't claim it." He sat back, thoughtful. "We can file a cease and desist for any active sale listings. If you want to move forward with eviction, we'll serve a formal notice. But what you described, coming home to find your things outside, being locked out with nowhere to go, that qualifies as unlawful eviction. Given your age, it could also fall under elder abuse. Do you want to pursue this fully?" he asked. I nodded. Slowly, firmly. My hands trembled in my lap, but my voice didn't. Yes. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding slipped out in a long exhale. Not quite relief, but something close. A quiet return of control. Trent reviewed each page again, highlighting what mattered, setting aside the rest. His pen moved quickly, notes tidy and direct. Then he slid a draft of the legal order across the desk. "Sign here to initiate." I picked up the pen, felt its familiar weight settle in my hand, and signed. The papers were served 2 days later. Trent had arranged it with precision, both the cease and desist and the eviction notice, delivered by a process server right to the front door of what used to be my house. I didn't see it happen. But the phone rang just after noon. It was Chris. "I can't believe you'd do this to us," he said, his voice tight and trembling, not with regret but with performance. "After everything we've done for you, you turn around and pull this legal stunt like we're strangers." I sat in silence, letting the words hang. Ashley's voice cut in behind him, sharp and furious. "She's a liar. You told me she signed it. You said it was done. And now we're getting served like squatters." Chris returned to the phone. "You made me believe the transfer was taken care of. You said it was filed. How could you lie like that, Mom?" A beat passed before he added, "And you never told us you owned another property. You've been collecting rent from that place for years and never said a word. We're your family. That's betrayal." Ashley's voice was sharp on the other end of the line, pitching upward with every word. "You could have helped with Ethan's tuition. Instead, you let us struggle while you sat on some secret rental property, collecting checks like you were, what? Testing us." Chris jumped in, his voice trembling with forced hurt. I can't believe you'd lie to me like this, Mom. After everything I've done for you, and you had a whole building. Do you know how that makes us feel? You could at least transfer the title to us now and make things right. I stood by the window of the studio, staring out at the street, my knuckles white around the phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You removed me from my home, I said, each word low and deliberate. You boxed up my life, dumped it on the curb, and never looked back. And now you're upset because I didn't tell you about something that never belonged to you in the first place. There was silence on the line for a split second, and then Ashley's voice returned, full of outrage. You're twisting everything. We didn't remove you, stop. I said, my voice cut clean and cold. Don't gaslight me, Ashley. You changed the locks. Chris stammered, you always say you want to help, how is this helping? I took a breath, felt it steady me, I did help. I gave you time. I gave you money. I gave you my weekends, my retirement, my peace. And when I had nothing left to give, you took anyway. You don't get to be outraged that I kept something for myself. I pulled the phone from my ear. You don't get to demand my forgiveness while pretending you did nothing wrong. And I hung up. Next came the texts first. Ashley, you could have helped with Ethan's tuition while you sat on rental income. That's just cruel. That's disgusting. You are selfish. Then, Chris texted, Ashley and I talked. We're willing to forgive this, all of it. But only if we make things right. An email followed a moment later. A PDF attachment with hastily drawn-up documents, a new title transfer, this time to both of them. A note beneath it read, let's not let one misunderstanding destroy our family. Sign these so we can put this behind us. There was no mention of the locks. No mention of the note they left me. No mention of the night I spent alone, trying to breathe through heartbreak. Only their hurt. Their offense. Their rewritten version of the truth. They wanted my forgiveness. But only on their terms. And only if I handed over what they believed they were owed. I closed my eyes. I could still see my suitcase on the porch. Still hear the sound of the front door locking behind me. They weren't apologizing. They weren't even denying what they'd done. Over the next several months, Chris and Ashley tried everything. First, they hired a cheap lawyer who sent me a sloppy draft demanding I sign over the property. His claim? That I had promised it to them years ago. A bold lie, one that wouldn't hold up in any courtroom. When that failed, they pivoted to public sympathy. They started telling anyone who'd listen that I was heartless, that I'd thrown my only grandson out and left him homeless. But that story unraveled fast. The photos I'd taken that night, the ones I hadn't even known why I was taking, spread quickly. Several neighbors had seen the locksmith, watched as my belongings were dragged to the curb. One even overheard Ashley sneer, finally getting rid of that witch. It didn't paint the picture they were hoping for. No apology. No explanation. Their version of events crumbled under the weight of those images. The slander didn't stop there, though. Ashley posted online, cryptic messages meant to humiliate me without naming me directly, and whispers followed me through the community center and even the grocery store. But Trent O'Neill wasn't just any attorney, he was sharp, steady, and knew exactly how to respond. He drafted and served them a formal cease and desist, and once the paperwork hit their doorstep, the defamation stopped cold. Their legal case was thrown out without so much as a formal hearing. The judge reviewed the documents, the photos, and the timeline and declared the eviction unlawful. Not only was I confirmed as the rightful owner, but they were ordered to pay my legal fees in full. I walked out of that courtroom with my dignity intact, and with Trent's quiet confidence at my side. The elder abuse case took time to make its way through the system, but when it finally reached court, it was clear the judge had no patience for excuses. Trent had laid everything out, how I had been locked out of my home without warning, my belongings discarded like trash. He presented everything, photos, documents, the emotional toll etched into every step I'd taken since. I wasn't out for vengeance. I just wanted a formal acknowledgement of the harm they caused. I requested two things, a formal apology, written and posted to Ashley's social media where the slander had first taken root, and $10,000 to begin repairing the yard they destroyed in my absence. I didn't expect the judge to react the way he did. He was visibly disgusted as he flipped through the photo evidence. But what broke him, what made him set the folder down and adjust his glasses, was the story of the trellis. Ashley claimed they didn't know what it was, just an old wooden frame with vines, something they thought was junk. But among the things they'd tossed into a heap by the curb was a professionally printed storybook I had made back in the 90s. One of those publish your own keepsake books I saw on TV. It told the story of the trellis, how my father built it using cedar gifted to us by Frank's father. The wood had been grown on the farm where Frank grew up, and together, our fathers gifted it for us as a wedding gift. And how Frank and I were married beneath it, with ribbons and wildflowers woven through its beams. I had read it to Chris when he was little, and not long ago to Ethan. On the inside cover, in Chris's own handwriting, it said, "This is the story of my mommy and daddy." The judge's voice was heavy when he passed sentence. Chris was given 1 year in jail and a $2,000 fine for elder abuse and unlawful eviction. Ashley was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, followed by 6 months probation. She would wear an ankle monitor, and was fined $5,000 for her part in the abuse. The apology would be posted publicly, exactly as I had asked, and the restitution for the yard damage was to be paid within 90 days. There were no tears from them that day. Just silence. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not closure, not yet, but a step toward reclaiming what was taken from me. After everything was said and done, I used the money from Chris and Ashley to repair the yard. But the house no longer felt like home, it held too much sadness. It was in a good market and in a good neighborhood, and it sold quickly, well above asking price. I bought a condo afterward. I don't need all that space anymore. I do miss my grandson deeply, but Ashley refuses to let me see him. She says I'm toxic. That part still hurts. But through it all, something unexpected happened. I reconnected with an old friend. Trent and I have been spending time together. At our age, calling it dating feels almost silly, but we're both widowed, and the companionship feels right. He has a granddaughter and a grandson, and they've taken to me in a way I never expected. Just last week, they asked if they could call me grandma. I said yes. Sometimes, life breaks your heart just to make room for something better. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, but I've come to believe that some doors close so others can open. I lost a house, but I found peace. I lost a version of family, but I gained a new one. Trent makes me laugh in a way I didn't know I still could. His grandkids keep me young, and when they call me grandma, something in me heals a little more. I still keep Ethan's drawings in a box, and I still say a quiet prayer for him every night. Maybe he'll come back one day. Maybe he won't. But I'm not waiting in pain anymore. I'm living. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. If you've been through something like this, or you're still going through it, share your story in the comments. You never know who might read it and realize they're not alone. And if you're still in the middle of your storm, please don't give up. Healing takes time, but peace is possible. You deserve safety, love, and a life that feels like your own again.